Welcome to Lawyerpreneur, where we discuss creativity, entrepreneurship, and other trailblazing that enables us to distinguish ourselves from others, because being a lawyer doesn't have to mean doing business as usual. I am your host, Jeremy Richter. Today's episode is brought to you by Alps, who wishes you a happy spring. After a year that was anything but easy, Alps is committed to bringing ease to insurance. Alps is the nation's largest direct writer of lawyers' malpractice insurance. That means you have direct access to your insurance team, from account managers to claims attorneys. And Alps has the simplest, most straightforward online application out there. Qualifying firms can even apply, see rates, and bind coverage all in about 20 minutes. When it comes to continuing your coverage, Alps makes that easy too, with 100% online renewal. With Alps, you can spend less time insurancing and more time innovating. Get started at applyonline.alpsinsurance.com. That's applyonline.alpsinsurance.com. In addition to the corporate sponsorship that helps pay for the hosting and transcription of the show, you can support Lawyerpreneur on Patreon at patreon.com/lawyerpreneur. For less than the cost of a .1, you can help pay for the time it takes to create and edit Lawyerpreneur and receive copies of my two most recent books, Stop Putting Out Fires and Level Up Your Law Practice. Now, on to the show. My guest today is Robert Ingalls, who is the founder and operator of LawPods, and he wants to help law firms make podcasts that sound professional and generate business. Robert, welcome to the show.
Jeremy, thanks so much for having me. I've been following your work for a little while from a distance before we even connected. Anytime anybody's doing anything around lawyering and podcasting, I'm paying attention. So it's really cool to connect with you a few months ago and then get invited on the show. So thanks.
Well, thanks. That's nice to hear. All right. You are in North Carolina, and North Carolina, particularly Charlotte, where you're at now, much like Nashville in the last few years, seems to have been, for whatever reason, a hotbed of people doing creative and innovative things. What is it about Charlotte that draws that?
Yeah, I wish I had the perfect answer for you, but I'll tell you what I've seen here, having been involved in the tech community specifically. When I first kind of got that entrepreneurial itch, I really didn't know where or how to scratch it. So one of the things that was super interesting to me was the tech community. And the tech community was vibrant already. This is around 2015, 16 in Charlotte. So I just started showing up at different events in the startup community, at different tech events. And I got to know those people really well, made some really lasting friendships. But it was obvious to me, having done a lot of traveling, that Charlotte was in a unique position, that people were moving here that had creative ideas. People were starting different accelerators here, starting co-working spaces around entrepreneurship. And then investors were coming here and investing in companies. And I think some of it has to do with just some really cool companies came out of here. And when we see people doing cool things, we want to go to those people and do those cool things.
Yeah.
And I think that was part of it. And it's just been growing on that. And then Charlotte as a city it's a really cool place. It has a lot of different pockets in it that cater to different personalities. There's a little bit of something for everyone, depending on where you go in Charlotte. And it's been growing year over year. And then the more it grows, because people see it getting cool. Other people are moving. I feel like it's, kind of that's what's happening in Austin. It's like people started moving there. They saw people moving. They're like, well, I want to move there too. But it's been a really cool scene over here. And I was telling you off the recording a few minutes ago, I'm actually moving from here and I'm sad to go, but we're just moving, a couple hours across the state to Raleigh, and they're actually doing some fun stuff over there too. North Carolina as a whole, I feel like, is doing some fun things in our cities.
Well, cool. All right. My only interaction with Charlotte is having sprinted through its airport because one flight was late and the other was early. But it sounds like I probably need to make a trip up there at some point.
Yeah, you and everyone else. I mean, honestly, like before I moved to Charlotte, that was a lot of my experience with it too, trying to run from A over to E.
Tell me about LawPods, what it is, and how you got into it.
Sure. So the short answer to what it is it's a production company that produces podcasts for lawyers that sound professional, establish the lawyers as, thought leaders and innovators, and build relationships that are going to generate revenue for the firm. And how I got into it is a much longer story. But the start of it is I am a recovering attorney. I spent almost 7 years, most of that in litigation. And over that period of time, I discovered that law wasn't really for me, that I needed to do something else. And I didn't know what that was going to be when I first I kind of had that moment where, I'd gotten married and we were like, maybe we'll have kids one day. I don't know who we were clowning because we were both like on the other side of 35, like we had all the time in the world. And my wife came to me within a couple of months and she was like, I think we should start having babies now. And I went, oh shit, like this guy's not ready for babies. And so I kind of had, I took a self-assessment and I sat down and I started writing things that I needed to get together. And I realized through that process that I was profoundly unhappy with my career. And I'd been feeling it a long time and trying to figure things out. Because when I first got out, I went in criminal law. And I found out after really a year of that I did not have the constitution for it. Lawyers say, oh, you have to compartmentalize. You have to leave it at work. I don't have that ability. Like I don't have it. I wasn't able to develop it. When it happens in my life, it happens in my life, no matter where it happens. And that's really hard. I think criminal makes it really hard. Family law, like domestic stuff, that makes it really hard if you can't compartmentalize. And even civil litigation, which I was mainly in, it still weighed on me. I still woke up with it. It was very stressful for me from that perspective, from worrying about the clients and the outcomes and things like that. But not to get too in the weeds in the story, but I realized I'm not happy with what I'm doing. I'm actually like full of anxiety all the time. And I think I need to do something different. And my first reaction was, well, maybe I just need to practice something different. So I did that. And I've heard this story a lot of times from other lawyers. Like the last thing I tried to do was estate planning. And I didn't make it far in that at all. God bless estate planning attorneys. And I know some that do high level work where it's like, it's really, I'm sure really invigorating for them. But what I was doing was so boring. It was really just kind of taking notes from people, understanding what they needed, and then pumping it into a machine that pumps it back out and sign here, date here. And oh man, that doesn't work for me. And so finally I started a podcast out of my law firm because I'd gotten just as a hobby into it, thought it was really interesting. Like I bought $1,000 worth of gear 30 days after listening to my first podcast. I'm sure that ended badly for a lot of other people, but thankfully it worked for me. This mic is one of them. And I really liked it. So while I was trying to figure out my law life, I was also just having some fun with a podcast. I was podcasting with friends. I started my own podcast and I was just learning about it because that's what happens with our hobbies. Like something interests us and we learn about it for no other reason than the pleasure of obtaining the information and learning and getting better. And so I kept on that track. And then I was putting down ideas for businesses. And I went through a few different ideas. It was, what am I going to do? And I wanted to kind of stay law adjacent, I felt like. And I'm sure that part of that is that I really did appreciate everything I did with law and I was connected to the community. And I'm sure some of it was sunk cost, like, well, at least you'll stay connected and you'll use these types of relationships. But at the same time, I felt like I was so uniquely qualified to serve lawyers because I'd been one. I knew them. I knew the ins and the outs. I spoke the language. But it wasn't immediately apparent to me that podcasting was the way I was going to do it because I know I've heard other people on your show say that, like, kind of who am I? Who would I be to do this thing for them? And so, because I had just gotten into it, my background is criminal justice and law and no marketing, no advertising, one business class in undergrad. And so the idea of just like jumping out and being like, I run a business doing this thing I have no professional training in was scary to me. I mean, there was a mindset issue to overcome there. Totally. But it all really came together. I had gone to a conference and just a podcasting conference that I won tickets to, or I wouldn't have gone because it was in LA. And I meet other people that are creating podcasts. And I went, wow, it was like a light bulb went off. I was like, there's something here. And other people are doing this thing. They're making them for other people. They're making money doing it. And I kind of saw the pathway there. And then within a couple of months of going to that conference, I came back. I was at a networking event because if there's one thing I do well, it's show up. So I'm happy that the world's opening back up because I'm ready to show up. And I was at a networking event and one of the lawyers had seen me doing some podcasting stuff. And he's a relatively notable lawyer in the community. And he said, I see you're doing this podcasting stuff. I've always wanted to do that. Can you help? I said, yeah, I'd love to help. He said, come by tomorrow morning. I haven't closed a client that quick again, but it was great. I went over that morning. We started making a podcast together. He's been one of my biggest champions from day one. That was a little over 4.5 years ago. And we've come a long way since then. And, we have AM 100 law firms that we're serving, which just blows my mind that places I am positive would not hire me as an attorney to work for them. I now have business relationship with, so that's been really cool. And Jeremy, that is the short story.
All right. I like it. So, for lawyers, it seems like if you want to do business with lawyers, removing the technical obstacles and creating an easy path for something like you're doing with podcasting is the most viable way to introduce that and make it sustainable. Is that what you've seen?
Absolutely. And that's really what, a lot of businesses listening to customers and prospective customers. And one of the things I heard over and over and over is we don't have time for this. We don't have the energy or even the inclination to try to do this ourselves. And my main competitors, when I started out, were, at least for law firms, were their PR companies, their existing content marketing companies who were like, well, yeah, we'll also do this for you. But it was kind of cobbled together and they would have some homework, essentially. Part of the process was still in their hands. So they had to, they had to find a host and upload it to the host because the content marketing company just created the content and they'd give it to them and say, okay, now go figure out how to do all the rest of it. And I knew just from my own perspective in making a podcast and having to learn all that there's a lot to it. And early on, I realized that they didn't want to do all that and they shouldn't be trying to figure it out. Even if you have an in-house person, it's not a great use of their time. And so really from the beginning, our value proposition was you do the talking and we do the rest.
That's a good tagline.
I haven't talked to an attorney about memorializing that. I'm not sure if anyone else is using it, but I like it.
Yeah. You need to go to the USPTO website before this airs and check that out. All right. So I'm trying to figure out what direction I want to go with this.
Yeah, you're good.
You started podcasting back in 2016. Is that right?
Yeah, I got my gear in 15 and then started in earnest in 16.
All right. I started listening to podcasts in 2016. I think I had known of them before that.
Right.
But that's about the same time that I had started my law blog in 2016 and was trying to figure out blogging and all of those things. So I was way behind on blogging. But that's how I started consuming all of that information. And now, that's how I can't tell you the last time I've listened to a radio in my car because it's always either podcasts or audiobooks.
Right.
But when it came 2020 and I decided I was going to start my own podcast, there was still this fear. I had what I thought of as my writing expertise that I was comfortable with, but I absolutely wasn't comfortable with the audio portion of that. And that took a long time to figure out. And it was a whole different vessel. And so how did you get to where it sounds like you were pretty quick between this is interesting to listen to and I want to do this, because those are two very different things. How did that work for you?
Yeah, it really did happen that quickly. I looked, because I know I listened to my first podcast in early September, and by early October I owned the gear, and that was all the research time it took to figure out exactly what gear I should buy. And I don't know, I listened to it, I listened to my first one and I didn't love the very first one I listened to, but I was already in the app. I brought up another one. I was running a law office at the time, and I had some employees, and I was like, well, office culture is something I kind of struggle with because it was my first time like really managing a team. And so I searched for this show. It's called Awesome Office. And it's the very first episode of it was with one of the founders of Quest Nutrition. His name's Tom Bilyeu, and awesome guy. He's actually doing something in he has his own podcast. He's left that company. He's doing something in kind of the mindset space now, which I love it. But at the time, I listened to that podcast, and you can hear something 1,000 times, and it just takes that one time of hearing it from one person a certain way, and it just clicks. And really, I mean, the major takeaway that I got from him is you literally can do anything you want to. You just have to get over telling yourself that you can't and go figure it out. And I mean, that's a simplistic way of saying it, but that was really kind of what resonated with me in that moment. And and along with that mindset kind of, light bulb that went off, it was also like, this podcasting thing is so cool. Like, only listening to a few hours from a couple episodes, and I was just smitten with it. Just the ability for two people who I would have never heard of before. Like, I just don't think I would have ever found these people through any other channel at that point in time, to just listen to on my phone, this little intimate conversation from a show that really wasn't that big. And, and then take that with me and literally change my life, like much bigger than I expected. I mean, I really do point a lot back to that moment in time. And so I bought that gear, and I don't know if your listeners can tell yet, but I really like to hear myself talk. So that helped. That helped was I did. I mean, and that's the only thing I tell people a lot. That's really the only thing I miss about law is those moments in court where I get to argue, where I get to, cross-examine witnesses and give closing statements. Like, I live for that. I live for that high that you get from trial, and you don't really get it too many other places. So I do as much public speaking as I can to try to replicate that. But I really enjoy communicating with other people. And I saw podcasting as such a unique way that was just getting started to connect with other people. And it's so much more powerful to me than I feel like video is, because you're not asking someone to do anything when you serve them audio. You're not asking them to stop and read. You're not asking them to divert their attention away from whatever they're doing and watch. You're saying, continue on with your life while I give you this information, and you can decide in 60 seconds or, 60 minutes if this is something that you enjoy. But I'm not asking for your time. I mean, I think Gary Vee said he's like, audio sells you time. So at the time when I started the company, I saw the way podcasting was growing, but I didn't even expect it to grow at the rate that it has since then. And I don't think it's going anywhere. I think it's going to get more woven into our life with smart speakers. I think a lot of advertising is going to start being done that way, because advertising is all about attention, and we don't have to divide our attention nearly the same way to take in those advertisements.
One of the things you said that I wholeheartedly agree with is that you were able to listen to an intimate conversation between two people. And one of the things I like about audio and about podcasts is that the people who I've listened to for years, we've never met, likely never will meet, but I know those people. Like, I know their voices.
Yeah.
I know how they laugh. I know what makes them laugh. And I've never had any kind of interaction with them, but like, I feel like I know those people in a way that other mediums don't provide. Writing is really limited, and I love writing, and it's my preferred medium, but it doesn't give you that same access to a person. What is it about audio and that connection that also lets you exhibit your expertise, which I'm sure is a selling point for your clients and potential clients?
Sure.
That gives their listeners a reason to do business with them?
Sure. And let me loop back so I don't forget, because something you just said resonated with me a lot. The fact that those people that you listen to, and you know their voice, and kind of feel like you know who they are, because this happened to me. I'd been listening to I went to that first conference I told you I won a ticket to, and I'd been listening to this one show a lot. It's called Entrepreneur on Fire. And it's one of the more famous shows in the world, certainly one of the more famous business shows. And I'd been listening to it since basically the beginning. It was probably the third podcast I ever listened to. And I was sitting in this room waiting for a session to start. And I just heard this voice and I went, wow. Like it was like hearing an old friend. And I knew who it was before I turned around. It was the host of Entrepreneur on Fire. And my second thought was, man, he talks really slow. And then I realized, I listen to podcasts on 2X. So when you meet him in person, you're like, get to the point. But it told me, it kind of showed me in that moment, I felt like I already knew him, like I had a relationship with him. If he tried to start a business with me that day, he would have been in a much better position than if he'd have just shown up cold, because I knew him. I trusted him. I liked him. I also knew that he knew what he was talking about. And that's one of the things that podcasting does for you. Like when I told you what I did earlier, a big part of it is establishing yourself as a thought leader, is letting people know who you are, letting them know you know what you're talking about. And also it is important to let them know a little bit about you as a person. Don't just get on there and just here's the information. People, even if they want this information really bad, they're going to have a hard time listening to that. You got to inject the flavor. You got to feel like you're in a consultation with someone who, let's say you're a family law attorney. If someone's listening to your family law podcast, they're in probably pretty tough shape in this moment. And you have to remember that while you're talking to them. Think about that person and what they would be like sitting across the table asking you these questions, and have that conversation with them like that, because you want them to know you, like you, and trust you the same as you do in a consult. And the power of that podcast is it does establish you as the expert in their mind. They had questions when they showed up. That's why they were there to start with. That's why they clicked on the post about the question that they had. That's why they pressed play. And now they're listening to you. They're getting a feel for who you are. They're getting a feel for your personality. You want them to like you. And more importantly, I think it's important to let a client rule you out as well. Like, let them know your personality. If that's not going to work for them, that saves you time and energy right there. But then after you have gained that trust, they've picked up the phone, they've set that appointment. Now they're sitting across the table from you. And now you open your mouth. Now it's not going to be that same relationship. They didn't spend hours and hours of their life over years listening. I hope not. That'd be strange. But they know you already. They knew what you sounded like before you opened your mouth. You already have a degree of credibility with them that you wouldn't have gotten with written word. And now maybe if they watched a lot of videos, perhaps they could get to that, but videos are hard. And I feel like all of us are lawyers. We've watched enough lawyer videos. They are seldom done well because they're hard. We don't even know what to do with our hands when the camera turns on. And when it's podcasting, you can wave them in the air if you need to. And
yeah, that's why mine's audio only. So I don't have to think about those things.
Yeah, there you go. And so it's really just your voice coming across. You get to sit back in your chair comfortable and have a conversation, letting people know who you are, establish yourself as that thought leader. And then when you do get to go on that journey with them, they're going to be a lot more comfortable at the end of that consultation, striking you that $5,000, $10,000 check that it's going to take to get started on this journey together.
So one of the things that I think is most powerful about podcasting is what you mentioned earlier, that it is essentially expertise on demand. Like, you put it out there and people find it when they need it.
Right.
Unless they're just following you and listening to everything, but that's not most things. It's on demand, it's available. How did you, when you were starting out and then you start pitching to lawyers about this business idea that you've got, how did you start demonstrating your expertise to them and selling them on this new idea?
Man, that was hard. It really was. And as we all know, lawyers are notoriously slow to adopt new technology. So that made it even harder. This was to them. And honestly, that's still something I struggle with. Is it's a bright, shiny object to them. They are positive. They don't need it. And they are more positive it's going to go away and they're never going to need it. Just like websites did. They know what they're doing. And so I still do struggle to overcome that. Yeah. So it's still a big part of my process is talking to people about the value proposition in podcasting, helping them understand that it's not something that is going to go away tomorrow, that it's not just me that wants it. Obviously, from a business perspective, I need that to be true, but I also went all in on it because I believe it's true. And so I do spend a decent amount of time in education, and we think about that like from a marketing perspective, we need to help our clients know why they need what we need. So, in the beginning, when I first started out, I, having no marketing background at all, spent a lot of time talking about features and a lot less time helping them understand what those features turn into, like how those features play into their story that generates revenue for them at the end of the day, because that's what most of them want. And so, over time, we figured out how to tell that story, how to help them understand the things about podcasting that we've just been talking about that are so powerful, that really do impact your bottom line. They're going to help you get your voice out into the community and create yourself as that expert that people listen to. And honestly, right now, I think the window is closing, but right now it is still hip. Like if you have a podcast, that is still hip to people. I mean, I'm sure when you launched yours, you felt that. People were like, oh, that's cool. You know, it's starting to be picked on in mainstream culture. That's when you've arrived. Like people, oh, the last thing we need is another podcast. That is, I love hearing that, because now we're in the conversation. Like, that's right. 10 years ago, that was the joke about social media managers. If you were a social media manager, you were the butt of a joke because that's a made up profession and it's not real. And now good social media managers get paid because that's where marketing is. I mean, think about that. It's silly to think that that's the way people treated someone who did your Facebook advertising. And now the dollars there are just unbelievable. And so, I mean, I think that podcasting is on a very similar trajectory. So
we talked about marketing, that you did not have expertise in marketing. Just like when I started doing my writing and blogging and even marketing and branding for my law practice, I didn't have any. I have some resources for that I always go to, that I will, if anybody wants to talk about marketing, these are the books or the people I tell them to listen to. Who is that for you?
Oh man, if I had to pick one, it's Seth Godin. I just think he's just a marketing genius. He wrote this book. Oh man, I'm drawing a blank on it right now, but it's around 99. And I can shoot that to you after, because I'll figure it out as soon as I get off of here with you.
Yeah.
But when I listened to it in like 2016, and it felt like he wrote it like in 2014, with how much he understood what was coming. And since I can't even tell you how many books he's written. He's written a lot of books, and I've probably only gotten through maybe 50% of them. And that's a lot. And I've seen him speak live, and he just consistently has his finger on the pulse of the marketing industry. He understands how to tell a story, and he understands the power, because that's really what marketing is figuring out a way to tell your story, to help your customer understand how they fit in that story. And not only how they fit, how they are the hero of that story, and how you are going to be, the Han Solo to their Luke Skywalker, and make them do amazing things. And I think that's where some people kind of fail, is they try to make themselves the hero of the customer story, and the customer doesn't like that. But yeah, Seth Godin he's fantastic. He's got a great podcast, like everyone does. Akimbo, I think is the name of his podcast. And it's quirky little podcast, 15 to 30 minute episodes. Very good.
And I'll tell you, and if you haven't read this book and you just happen to be saying these things that align with it so closely, then it's going to be kind of scary. But my go-to book is Building a Story Brand by Donald Miller, who talks a lot.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, yes. Okay. Yeah.
And I'm sure it would be really weird if you were saying all those things and hadn't read that book.
Right. So. Right. Yeah, definitely. Years ago. And I like that podcast as well. And I mean, from my marketing perspective, we think about that. I've hired story brand consultants to work on things that we use in marketing, because I love that angle so much. It resonates. And that's the thing. The moment you hear that book, you go, this works on me all the time. And you realize it. You're like, I ended up buying this thing because I wanted to be this kind of person that they made me feel like I was going to be.
Yes.
And yeah, so I love that.
All right. So it's, we had a pandemic. I guess we still have one going on, but so many new podcasts have launched in the last year and a half. What is ahead for you and LawPods as y'all move forward? And we'll kind of close out with this.
Sure. So right now we're really focused on scaling up. The first few years of the business, we were focusing on getting customers because, you got to prove out the model and stay alive. but we were also focusing a lot on building the foundation, because this is not a boutique business for me. This isn't something I'm going to make enough money to survive on and then retire. This is an asset that I'm building. I'm building a company that's going to be larger than me. And so we thought a lot about that, about who we are, who we want to be, and how to build that. So we really build our foundation very strong. Our systems, our processes, everything is documented. We have workflows, a lot of technology and automation. And now we are focused on stress testing those systems. Like, we've really moved from, just kind of doing a little of this, a little of that, and building foundations to just selling. We sell right now. And so we're really focused on scaling over the next, 2 to 5 years, depending on like when we hit the targets we're trying to hit, and getting a lot of that. And that's been really interesting for me, because I'm the face of the business right now, and I have no sales background. I, got those early customers. I think I'll probably answer a little of the question I didn't answer earlier. I got those early customers by just showing up and harassing people, by, leaning on my network and saying, just telling people like, look, this is coming. And I had some marketing materials that I would give people. It's funny to look at them now. It's so silly, but you got to start ugly. And so I sold them all like early on, these small firms, friends of mine usually, that I could get to help me. And then from there, we started getting larger and larger clients. And damn, bro, I just lost my train of thought in the middle of that sentence. Oh, I tangented myself. But I'm killing you. We're just falling apart together today, aren't we?
There's gonna be a lot of editing on this one.
Oh my God, I'm so sorry. I know what it takes to edit these kinds of things. Where the hell? What was your question?
You were talking about where you're going. You're talking about sales.
Right. Oh, there we go. That's the hook I needed. So all that's to say that I really didn't have a background in sales, and I had to figure it out. And I still don't love it. I really don't love cold outreach to people. And the idea of sending, multiple emails to people just makes me shiver. But at the same time, you have to figure it out. You have to lean into that uncomfortable situation and do it. And thank God for sales books and training, because that's kind of like almost every sales book you read, it starts with, look, I know you hate this. I know it doesn't feel good, but you gotta do it. You got to pick up the phone. You got to send that message. You got to send that email, and then you got to do it again 4, 5, 8 times. Like, you got to harass these people, because those are going to be the people who end up eventually buying from you. And you're going to get a lot of, go screw yourself. And I take that so personally. It's hard. And when I sit and sell for 6 hours, it's, I come up from that, and it's like I ran out of oxygen at the bottom of the ocean, and I'm just, it really takes it out of me. But every day that I do it, I get better at it. It's, I'm learning a lot about it, learning how to do these conversations better, how to, present that value prop a little bit better to people. And so focusing on sales has been it's been a very challenging experience, but I've learned a lot from it. But that really is what we're doing. We're leaning in to our outreach and going to conferences. That's another thing. I show up. So exhibiting at conferences, we've already started doing that, because anybody who's in the marketing game is, a lot of it, you got to deliver a stellar client experience. And we do that. Like, our clients love us, 100% retention. Like, they do not leave us, but we need to make our name kind of synonymous with podcasting. People don't know us. Most of the people I cold call have never heard of us. And so that's a big part of it, is just getting those touches, getting to that requisite number of touches where someone feels comfortable at least having that conversation and going, yeah, LawPods, right. You work on this other firm that we know. We've seen you at conferences. Let's talk. Call me. And so that's really where we're focused, is scaling this thing up and seeing where it goes. We have a lot of ideas in the pipeline. I am an idea person, but thankfully I have a good team of mentors and coaches that keep me focused on the main thing being the main thing, because I love to chase squirrels. And so we're really focused. We're hyper-focused, but we do have a lot of things on the horizon as the company starts to scale that we think are going to be very valuable for our lawyers, and even outside the legal community when the time is right. But there's just so many other things I think are being kind of just hodgepodge together, like we have this person doing this one thing and this person doing this one thing. And I think we're going to be uniquely qualified to be the corner of a marketing strategy. And so that's part of the long-term goal is to ramp up our processes to make your podcast be really the cornerstone of your entire marketing strategy. So that's the long-term vision.
I like it. And what I particularly enjoyed about this conversation is that I think so much of it transcends the niche business that we're talking about and is so broadly applicable to whatever types of businesses people are involved in or want to be involved in that are listening. So I appreciate your expertise that you shared with us and all the wisdom along the way here.
I know, absolutely. Thanks so much for having me. If anybody wants to reach out, please feel free. You can find me on LinkedIn at Robert Ingalls. There are not a lot of us out there, so I'm pretty easy to find. And also, please feel free to shoot me an email at robert@lawpods.com. I know a lot of people that listen to shows like this maybe are, especially people who are trying to be creative and maybe the law isn't for them. I'm always happy to talk to people about that as well. That's one of the top 5 conversations I have are people who are like, I don't think I want to do this anymore. So I'm always happy to hear from people. And Jeremy, thanks again so much for having me. I love what you're doing.
Thanks so much. Have a good one. Thanks for listening, and I hope you've enjoyed today's show. Please take time to rate and subscribe at whatever podcatcher you're listening on. And if you want more from me, you can find me at jeremywrichter.com. You can also find me on Twitter at RichterJW. And if you want the extra audio and benefits available at Patreon, you can become a patron at patreon.com/lawyerpreneur. Thanks for listening.